Hi friends, welcome back to 3 Barrow Farm, to our little space here in central Victoria, Australia. We live on 42 acres, we live off-grid and we try to grow as much food as we can. I've got my girls coming to say hi. Hello. Hello. You want cuddles? All right, I've got my girls joining me. Each year for the past 3 years, or the 3 growing seasons, which I classify from the start of spring to the end of autumn, I do a tally. So I weigh everything that we harvest from the garden and I keep a tally of it. Now, there are a few things that I don't weigh. I don't weigh my herbs and my greens. Now, the reason for this is, I guess, herbs and leafy greens don't really weigh that much, but also I don't find myself ever purchasing these vegetables and foods. I'm only using what I grow. Sometimes I might purchase some dried herbs depending on my growing situation, but I don't tally them. So those things won't be mentioned. So things like kale and lettuce and any herbs won't be weighed, so they won't be mentioned in this video. But I do grow a huge amount of lettuces and greens and herbs as well. This year was particularly wonderful for basil. I grew a heap of basil and that was one of my aims for the year. So I'm very, very happy about that. So let's look at what I've harvested this year. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised, just like I was. Last winter, I weighed everything that I brought in from my garden. I haven't done this before and I didn't do a video, so I just wanted to touch base on what I did grow last winter. And I'm going to be comparing that in another video at the end of this winter in 2026 to what I grew last season. I think last winter will probably do better than this winter, considering the fact that I've planted a smaller garden than I normally do. But last winter in 2025, I grew over 13 kilos of broccoli, 10 kilos of cabbage, 24 kilograms of cauliflower. I do remember harvesting a huge amount of cauliflowers. I grew just around 3 kilos of fennel. And it seems silly to have it on the list, but I do have it there. I grew 500 grams of spring onions, which I don't think is correct because spring onions is something I also don't usually weigh and I don't purchase either. So I have spring onions and leeks growing all the time. So I think I just didn't tally the harvests of those 2 vegetables very well at all because I don't have leek on here as well. And I know that I grew a whole heap of leek. And I also didn't include leek in my summer tallies, but I did grow some massive leeks. So spring onions and leeks are probably one of those things that I don't mention either. Okay, so for the growing year of 2025 to 2026, so we're starting in September 2025 and we're ending in May of 2026. This growing season, we grew over 71 kilos of apples, which is huge because last year we only harvested around 13 kilos. And the year before that, we harvested 40 kilos. So my netting techniques that I had in place would have saved a lot of apples. Of course, there are more apples that grow on our trees than what I have tallied. I've only tallied what we've actually harvested and taken inside into our house and consumed or are still consuming. The birds, particularly the cockatoos, they destroy a whole amount of apples. So we would have had a lot gone to waste. So we could have harvested a bit more than that. The next fruit that I'm going to mention is very pitiful. But if you would have known how hard it has been the last 2 growing seasons to actually pick an apricot, you would understand why I measured that we grew 340 grams of apricots. I think there were 3 apricots. And they were small ones. But we have had the hardest time with stone fruit that has flowered in early spring and then we've had hailstorms. So those hailstorms and that cold snap of weather just kills the blossoms and they never get to fruit. So I've tallied apricots for that reason. This growing season, I believe that my tally of beetroot is incorrect. I know that I sent my mum with a whole heap of beetroot, so I'm pretty sure we grew more than 2.6 kilograms. And it could be close to last year's. So last year we grew over 5 kilos, so I reckon it's around that amount. The year before that, we grew 17 kilos. I need to up my game on beetroot. And I think the reason that I slacked off the last couple of years is because we were still working through all that pickled beetroot that I'd made from 2 years prior. So I need to grow some more. I've got more growing this winter so we can make more pickled beetroot. I've got capsicum here. I don't think capsicum is worth mentioning. Again, 91 grams. Last year I grew just over 500 grams and the year before that I grew 1.5 kilos. Capsicums are something that I need to grow in a polytunnel or a greenhouse. I don't have that structure yet, so I just don't grow them very well. It's too cold here. Let's move on to something else. Carrots. I grew just over 7 kilos of carrots this year. That is less than the last 2 previous years, but I just didn't get the seed in time. Chilies. I didn't need to grow chilies this year. So I did grow a couple of heirloom chilies. I'm not sure what variety they were, but it was just a mix packet that I had and I grew over 200 grams of chilies. There were just a few. So last year I grew 2 kilos, but the year before that, so 2023 to 2024, I grew a huge amount, but I don't have record of it. So I'm not sure what happened there. It was my first year keeping tally, so I might have not been in the rhythm of weighing everything as I brought it in, but I still have dried chilies from that year. So I didn't really need to grow any. Corn is next. I'm doing this alphabetically, by the way. You will notice that. I grew 0 corn. I must have gotten it in too late. That first snap of frost we had just took out whatever we had growing. And I did harvest a few cobs that were meant to be flower corn, but they weren't fully pollinated either. It just wasn't the year for corn. Last year I grew around 1 kilo of blue popping corn. And I've still got some of that blue popping corn. Cucumbers. We grew almost 2.5 kilos of cucumbers this year. That is nowhere near as many as we grew the year before, which was close to 13 kilos. So I have made a whole heap of refrigerator pickles with the cucumbers that we grew this year, but not as much as I did the previous year. So I don't think we'll have enough to see us through till the next cucumbers are ready to harvest. Eggplants. I put in some late eggplants into my garden that I purchased from the nursery, and I was really surprised. I got 2.2 kilos of eggplants off them. And last year I grew some larger eggplants and I got 2.5 kilos of eggplants. The year before that we got just over 600 grams of eggplants. So we're doing well with the eggplants, around the 2 kilos, which is really great. Gage. Now the gage is not a green gage, I am told by my husband, who is our fruit expert on our farm. He takes care of the trees and I take care of harvesting the goodies on the trees and eating the goodies that we get from the trees. But he tells me that it is not a green gage. I'm going to say plum, but he says it's not a plum either. It is a gage and it is not a green gage. So I don't know. I can't give you any more information than that. But we harvested 3.5 kilos of gages and they were yummy. They were so good. And last year we didn't get a lot of them. So I'm not sure what happened there with those. And I don't have a tally for the year before that. So yeah, this was the year for gages. Nashis. We grew over 54 kilograms of nashis. Now that is a lot because last year I thought it was a lot and we grew 25 kilos, but 54 kilos is a huge amount. The year before that, we harvested 4.5 kilograms. So the nashi tree is doing really well. We ended up bottling some of those nashis, which I've never done before. So I'm really interested to see how they go. My daughter even tried to dehydrate the nashis. They didn't turn out too well, but we ate a ton and we gave away a huge amount of nashis, which makes me happy that lots of people are enjoying all the nashis that tree grew, that one tree. Onions. I have a tally for onions 2 years ago, 12 kilos. We grew in 2023 to 2024. The previous year to this one, we grew around 500 grams. This year, none. Now, this is purposeful, and I have actually purchased some onions from our local greengrocers because I need to use them in certain things, like I use them in fire cider and things like that. But we don't eat onions at the moment that often, so there's reason for not growing them. Nectarines. The 2 years prior, when I was tallying up, none, zilch. And I'm surprised at that. I'm not sure whether I didn't weigh them or whether the kids just ate them fresh off the tree. I think we did get some nectarines definitely last year, so I just haven't tallied it. But this year we got around 9.1 kilos of nectarines and they were delicious. Parsnip. I grew 1.8 kilos of parsnips this year, and that's pretty good. I don't have a tally for the previous years. I know I have grown them before, but perhaps I didn't get them in the ground, or I just haven't kept a good tally on parsnip. Peaches. So we've had the same issue with peaches like we have with apricots, where we've had hail storms in spring when they've been blossoming and we've failed to get some peaches. We've also had curly leaf on our peaches and we had to cut back the trees really heavily, and so that we didn't get any fruit for a couple of years. Last year's tally, we had around 7 kilos of peaches and they were okay. I remember when we first moved here, we grew the most massive peaches. Like, I'm not kidding you. They were the size of some big apples and they were delicious. They were so good. This year was a reminder of that time. So, back when we first moved to the property, a few years in, we got some really fantastic years of peach harvests. And this year, I'm feeling like we're going back into that again. We had a whole heap of winters where it just rained and rained and we had hail and it just destroyed those trees. And because, of course, they got the leaf curl. We're now on top of all that leaf curl and yeah, they're looking really great. And we were really excited to get over 13 kilos of peaches, of which we ate fresh and we bottled some as well. Pears. So this is every single pear. We have about 5 different types of pears on our property and I just put it all into pears. They're all pears. So we got over 44 kilos this year of pears and we still have some fresh in the fridge in our shed that we're slowly taking out and eating. It is so yummy to have some fresh pears there still. Last year we got 7 kilos and the year before that we got 23.6 kilos. Plums. We had a fantastic year for plums. So 2 years ago or 2 growing seasons ago, we got over 9 kilos. And then last season, we got 5 kilos. This season, we grew 15 kilos, or we harvested 15 kilos. There were some bird damage. There's always birds coming in and eating them. So we don't get to harvest all of them. Prune plums. Now, we have lots of different plums, and I think perhaps I've been putting prune plums in the plum category, but this year I decided to separate the prune plum weighing from all the other plums, just because they are a different product. Like, we make prunes, we dry them to make dried prunes. So we grew 32 kilos of prune plums this year. That is a huge amount. We love, love, love eating them fresh. They don't last long though, so you can't store them. So we dried a lot. And every now and then when I'm walking past the pantry, I'll just open one of the jars and take out a couple of dried prune plums and eat them. So yummy. Now, potatoes. I'm not surprised that this has been one of the best years of growing potatoes. They were massive. They were massive, huge potatoes that we grew. 2 years back, we grew 43.8 kilos. Last season, we grew just under 25 kilos of potatoes. This year, we grew just under 75 kilos of potatoes. Wow. That is awesome. I'm really, really pleased with that. And we have still got a huge amount, obviously, in our drying cupboards. So I'm storing them in there with the fan on to move the air through. Of course, this fan wasn't being put on while we were away recently. So some of them did get, I think the cupboard got a bit humid, and some of them did start to sprout. We just ate them as quickly as we could, and the rest are looking okay. So as long as I keep that fan going, and now that it's colder too, there's no humidity disturbing them, I think they'll be fine and we'll be able to eat potatoes throughout the winter. Okay, this one really surprised me. Pumpkins. Oh my goodness. I remember harvesting the pumpkins not long ago before we went away and saying to you all that I think this year wasn't that great. Man, oh man, was I wrong. I was so wrong. I have a tally of last year's harvests of pumpkins and I only grew 10.8 kilos. I don't have a record of the year before. I have a feeling that year I didn't grow any. I had a really bad pumpkin year and I just didn't grow any. This year I grew 64.6 kilos. That's huge. That is almost as many as my best year. I think my best year was somewhere in the 70s. So 70 kilos of pumpkins. And that is amazing because most of those pumpkins came from the compost. They were rogue pumpkin vines and they grew the most magnificent pumpkins. And I've got a few massive ones as well. I've got some 5.5 kilo pumpkins and I've got one 8 kilo pumpkin. So we did really well with those. Rockmelons. This year was really hard for rockmelons. It was just so cold for so long. The season was so late that those rockmelon plants really, they were stunted from the cold. So yeah, the rockmelons didn't do too well. I didn't weigh any of them. Last year we grew a couple. I remember harvesting a couple and they were like around 600 grams. Yeah, not much to write home about. This isn't really the climate to be growing all of the rockmelons, but I try every year. I know I have succeeded at growing some really nice ones in the past, but so far the tallies are not fantastic on rockmelons. Tomatoes. I mean, this was such a slow year. I know we've all really struggled in central Victoria and some people in Melbourne as well. Like Victoria itself and Tasmania, we've really struggled because that spring just took till December to really kick in and then it was summer. We just had so many cold snaps. I mean, September is normal to have heaps of cold snaps because it doesn't really warm up here until November, but November even felt cooler. So I wasn't expecting much with the tomatoes, particularly because I didn't feel like I was harvesting a lot of tomatoes, but we ended up with 81 kilos of tomatoes. Last year was an amazing, overwhelming tomato year because we harvested over 125 kilos. And that was enough to see us through the entire year till we harvested that first tomato this year. Well, actually, maybe we did use a little bit of store purchased canned tomatoes for a little bit, but it saw us through most of the year. I bottled up so many bottles of tomatoes last season. And the one prior to that, we grew 66.5 kilos of tomatoes. Tromboncino. I haven't grown them for a while. So I haven't got a tally of previous years, but we grew just under 4 kilos of tromboncino. Watermelons. I did see a watermelon in my garden. I think the mice might have eaten it. So yeah, there was one there. Last year we grew 3.6 kilos of watermelons and they were nice. They weren't fantastic, but they were nice. Zucchini. Oh my goodness, there were so many zucchinis this year and I've still got so much frozen in the freezer. It was a wild zucchini year, but I also planted like somewhere around between 10 and 15 plants because the chickens had destroyed some, remember? And I thought they were dead, but then they grew back. So I went out and got more plants, planted them in, then everything else came back to life. So I had so many plants and I grew 106 kilos of zucchini this year. It's crazy. The years prior to that, I grew just under 21 kilos the previous growing season, and then the one before that was 38 kilograms. 106. That's massive. And we've come to the last letter of the alphabet. That is everything that I grew and weighed this year and compared to the 2 years prior. I hope you enjoyed going through all of that with me and being surprised like I have, particularly about the pumpkins and about the tomatoes too, because I really didn't think I'd grown. It didn't feel like I'd grown that many tomatoes, maybe because I wasn't here as well and I didn't do that final harvest and other people did it for me. And I think if I was here, there would have been perhaps a lot more tomatoes as well, because there were still lots of cherry tomatoes that hadn't been harvested. I'm not going to make people sit out here for hours trying to go through all of the cherry tomatoes. And I did end up getting some help with people just taking out all of the plants before I left for our holiday, because I knew I would come back. I knew it would frost when we were away, and it did. And I knew I'd come back to this sludge, because that's what happens with the tomatoes. But amazingly, I was still harvesting some big tomatoes and some cherry tomatoes off our vines even after that frost. Normally, the frost would take out the plants so much that anything that you would harvest after would just be rotten. But the way that the plants were protected over these tomatoes, they were able to ripen in the beautiful weather that we had after that first frost. And yeah, now we've probably had quite a few frosts and all of the summer plants have been pulled out of my garden. I think the eggplants are the only ones that are left to take out. So my friends, thank you for following along today and seeing what I grew this year compared to years prior. Let me know what your best harvest was this year. Which vegetable or fruit did you get the most out of? See you next time, friends. How you doing? You good? Enjoying the sunshine today?